Hi, welcome back to Way of the Wrench, and on today's video I'm going to be showing you how to use SketchUp to design your very own custom virtual pinball cabinet. And not only that, I'm also going to be going through all of the little problems and issues that you may encounter so that you will have an easier time when you go to design your very own. And I'm also going to be showing you how to take all of the parts that you've designed and lay them all out on a sheet of plywood so that you have an awesome cut plan and know exactly where to make your cuts when you start actually building this project. So let's get going. This is my fully finished designed custom wide body here. And before I get into actually showing how to draw this stuff, I thought it would be really important to talk about the individual design constraints that you're going to have for your own custom build. And it's a whole bunch of stuff that you need to know before you even start drawing, such as, how many monitors you're going to have. Are you going to have a 3 or a 2? Are you going to have a full DMD or a traditional 4:1 DMD? Are you going to make it look exactly like a certain type of pinball cabinet? Is it going to be standard, wide body, or custom in this case, like I've got? Which parts you're using, etc. So I thought we would kind of just go through them one by one. And then when I'm all done that, I will show you how to draw some of the parts up and the skills you'll need using SketchUp. So the very first thing that I think you need to figure out is what type of a cabinet are you going to make? Are you sticking to a traditional standard or wide body size Williams cabinet, for example? If you are, then you're going to have to search out the monitors that fit those exact dimensions. A pro for that is that any of the parts are going to be exact fit because you have made it to the exact dimensions that they traditionally were and what the parts are for. So that's a plus that way. Now, if you go to your own custom dimensions, and for my case, I did a custom wide body, then you aren't restricted by the monitors, but some of the parts still have to be a certain size, so you're gonna have to keep that in mind. So for me, I went with a bigger, wider TV, and it has its pros and cons. One of the cons is it makes my cabinet a little bit wider. It's about 1 inch wider than it should be. So now the wide body lockdown bars don't fit my design, and so I will have to make a custom one for that. Now, a pro for this 46-inch TV that I have is the display size makes it so that I can keep the exact standard dimensions on the sides here, so all of the other parts will fit perfectly forward. So that's something you're going to have to figure out right off the bat, and really you're going to have to figure that out way ahead of time so that you can actually figure out what monitors you need to buy. So since I knew I was going to make a custom one, then I didn't have to worry too much about exact sizing for my monitors and just find good monitors that worked well and looked good for my design. One of the next important design constraints that you're going to have to ask yourself is, do you want to go with a full DMD kind of setup, or do you want to go with a traditional 4:1 kind of aspect ratio DMD? Now, both of them have their pros and cons, so let's just start with the full DMD. So I went with the full DMD because it's got a lot of cool pup packs and things that are going on, where not only do you have the original score and stuff going on a regular DMD, but you can also have extra little movie clips and video clips, and some of the new games that are coming out have actual use for the full DMDs where they have other things going on. And you can always just kind of get a template where you center the traditional 4:1 and there's just some kind of moving stuff in the background, and they look quite cool. So I've decided to go with that. Now, one benefit of this is that I didn't have to hunt for a very expensive DMD. I just using a regular 19-inch computer monitor, so I'm going to be able to use that pretty cheaply. Now, the con for this, for the design aspect, is if I want a full DMD, I have to design a bigger back box for this to be able to fit. So it is a little bit higher than a normal back box, but I still think it looks pretty good. So if you want to go with a regular DMD size, there's pros and cons for it. So the first one is a pro would be that it looks more traditional, exactly how it would on a pinball cabinet. So if that's what you're looking for, then that'll look great. And that will make the back box size more the original size. Now, a con for doing that is, how do you actually get a monitor that fits in there so that it looks okay? Now, there's two ways. You can spend a lot of money and get a real DMD. That way the monitor is about this size and it fits in the traditional size back box. Or the other way you can do it is still use a 19-inch or some similar kind of size monitor. And instead of showing everything, you can just do a cutout on the front speaker panel so that all you see is that 4:1 ratio DMD screen. Or you can actually turn the monitor 90 degrees and stick some of it down into the bottom of the cabinet so that only the top part of it or the side of the monitor is shown, and you use that for your DMD. So you'll have to make your choice, but in my case, I am going with a full DMD. Now, when you're looking for your 3 monitors here, you kind of have to forward think a little bit about your design and what size do you actually need. However, when you're making a custom build, what size do you actually want? So one of the things I would recommend you do is you do a little bit of research and you look at other people's previous builds, and you can ask them questions about what size their monitors are, and that'll give you a better idea of what size monitor you should be looking for. So I kind of fell on these dimensions here, and so I'm going with a 32-inch for my back glass. This is a 19-inch monitor, and then my playing field is a 46-inch TV. Now, once you figure out your TVs and you've got some TVs with some good specs that you have already tested and they're going to work great for you, the next thing you need to do is figure out the actual dimensions of these monitors. Now, in most cases, these do not look great by just throwing the monitor in and being done. You kind of have to decase these things so that they're a little bit skinnier, a little bit lighter as well, because some of these are pretty heavy. And so you're going to have to decase these things and get your final dimensions. So once you take them apart, get a tape measure and write down your lengths, your height, and your width. And I would measure from the front of the screen to the bottom where the VESA mounts are, so that way you know where you're going to have to mount stuff. And so you're going to do that with all 3 monitors. And once you have those dimensions, you can draw a fake little monitor. It's basically just a big rectangle, and give it some thickness, and that will be required for you to be able to figure out how wide your cabinet needs to be and how long it needs to be, etc. Now, one of the things for the Playfield monitor that's really going to affect some design stuff is whether you have a long enough monitor to fill in the Playfield area. Now, I know on some people, especially when they're trying to stick to a standard size or a wide body cabinet, their limitations in the size of the monitor have reduced the length of it. So there's actually a bunch of inches here that they have to try to make up with something. And so what a lot of people do is they have kind of like a fake apron here, which isn't the Playfield and it's not the lock bar. It's just an area that you can kind of customize and do whatever you want. But there is another kind of piece that's required to kind of fill in the gap. Now, one of the big reasons I chose my 46-inch TV is because of the length of it. I don't actually have to do an apron. I'm going to do a custom 3-inch wide lockdown bar, and that's going to cover up right to the edge of the monitor, so it's going to be perfect. So like literally from here to there is 3 inches, so it's going to mesh perfectly. And if you look at the back here, it's pretty much where it needs to be. And there's room for a board for my LED matrix as well. So that's going to work out perfect. And while you're at it, don't only just get the external dimensions of your decased monitor. I would also try to get the dimensions of the actual display itself. Now, whether you plug it in and measure it that way, that's a pretty easy way to doing it, or you don't actually have to plug it in. If you look carefully, you can see where the edges of the actual display are and get those as well. And that way in SketchUp, you can draw an additional little box, and then you can insert an image, and it'll give you a better idea of what this will look like in your cabinet. So you can see on mine, I've got roughly an inch border or portrait around this monitor, so that will help me figure out how it's going to sit with other boards. Now, for your DMD screen, the same thing. You're going to want to figure out what your cutout size is for your speaker panel. And so you're going to not really want to have kind of blank black images where your border is on your screen. So you're going to want to measure the display size, and that way your cutout looks a little bit more exact. And then on my Playfield, same thing. You can see there's roughly an inch kind of portrait border around this monitor. So just kind of keep that in mind, and then that way when you put an image in, you can get a better view of what it will look like. Now, for most of your dimensions, I would say that probably the front surface of your monitor to your VESA mount for your back glass and your DMD is going to be good enough for your kind of like boxed rectangle you're going to make in SketchUp for it. However, your Playfield, I would kind of get some more dimensions here, and I'm going to show you why. So if I grab my monitor here and go to my move tool, and I'm just going to move it by the corner, and I'm going to go straight up and just kind of way up out of the way so I can kind of see it with you. Now I've just moved the Playfield monitor up and out of the way so that we can actually go and look at it from underneath. And the reason why is I wanted to show what other kind of dimensions you might need to know off of the actual Playfield monitor. Now what you're seeing here is a kind of a boss that sticks out deeper. This dimension here is from the front of the monitor right to the VESA mount. So this is where it's going to have to mount to something. But on my monitor, after I decased it, it was quite a lot thinner around the edges of the Playfield monitor. So the reason why I drew this into SketchUp is the next problem you're going to have is the backside of the monitor, especially along the edges here and by the front of the cabinet, are taking up space where other parts are trying to be, which are your flipper buttons and your MagnaSave buttons and your actual plunger. So I would recommend that you get these dimensions kind of figured out on your real monitor so you could draw them accurately in SketchUp as well. Now, it doesn't have to be super accurate, just basically measure all the way around the monitor and measure off the thickest part that's sticking out in these areas. Now, the parts that are going to interfere with your monitor placement for your Playfield are your actual flipper buttons, your MagnaSave buttons, because on the inside of the cabinet, you actually have those leaf switches and the wiring, so that can't keep up the same space. And then on the front side of the cabinet, you have your plunger, which extends inside about 5 inches and at an angle of about 5 degrees or so. So you can't have the monitor in those spots. Now, there's a couple solutions to this. First thing you could do is you could take the Playfield monitor and stick it all the way up at the top and keep it parallel with the top of the cabinet. I've seen a bunch of people do that. I'm not a fan of that. I kind of think it tends to make it look more like just a video game and that it actually is just a monitor. But if you do that, you will most likely clear all of these parts here and have no problems with the placement. Now, when I designed mine, I did want to have it kind of so that you had to look down through the glass and it looked like it was more in the right spot. So I was ultimately designing the top of the cabinet, the top of the Playfield to be 1 inch down at the front and about 6 inches down at the back. However, that literally put it right smack in the middle of all of these parts, so that wasn't going to work for me. Now, if this is your case, a couple things you could do. You could lower the plunger stock placement as low as you need, so 1 inch or 2 or 3, whatever you need to lower. That's one option. The other one is you can switch the plunger location with the launch ball button location, because the launch ball location does not extend into the cabinet as much, so you won't have any issues if you do that. However, you just have to kind of figure out if that's where you want it. Having to reach down 5-6 inches more to get your plunger doesn't really feel realistic when you're looking at the screen and it looks like the plunger's only 1 inch or so down past. So I didn't want to do that either. And then there is even another option. You don't put in a plunger and you just put a launch ball button. It works, but for me, like I said, I want to have that authentic pinball cabinet look, so the plunger was a must. So that wasn't going to work for me. The flipper buttons and the MagnaSave buttons, you can't really move these too much. The reason why is they're based off of someone resting their hand on the top of the lockdown bar, resting their fingers over to be able to hit the buttons. So if you were to lower this down 2-3 inches, it's not going to work. You're not going to be able to reach them with your fingers. So I would stick to the stock locations for these fingers. However, in my case, and I had no problem with extending it down about 1/4 inch further down. I measured with my hands over the edge of a table, much like it would be on the end of a cabinet, and it would actually even better for my hands specifically. So I did move them down 1/4 inch, and that allowed me to modify my position of my Playfield monitor so it still kind of has the feel of what I was looking for, just a little bit different. So what I ended up going with is the front of the Playfield monitor is going to be sitting right at the top of the cabinet at the front. And then the back is going to be 4 inches down. So I still get that realistic kind of look with the glass and the Playfield screen being down a little bit. So it should look a lot better. Now, what I did is I drew this temporarily with some lines on the outside of the cabinet so I could double check it was going to clear all my parts. So this dimension here is that thinner width of the TV, or thickness of the TV, which was 1.75 inches. So I drew the bottom of the monitor and then to where it would be at the back. And you can see that it is close But when I actually measured my parts with the backside and the nut and the leaf switches and stuff, I will be able to make this work for those flipper locations. And then I transferred the bottom or the furthest down section of the monitor to the front of the cab so that I could double check. And you can see there's lots of room, so the plunger's not going to hit. So that's one way that you can kind of lay out externally and make sure that nothing's going to hit with your monitor. And if we look at from the inside for placement, all I did is I got my dimensions from the front of the cabinet where I wanted it, which is, I believe, 3 inches. There's my 1 inch down, so the bottom of the cabinet. And right here is where I'm placing the monitor. So when I move the monitor back, grab the move tool or select tool, select the monitor, and I'm going to select the very top edge of the front of the monitor. And I'll back right out. And it sits right like that. So that right there to the front of the cab is 3 inches. Now you can see the angle there. So right at the top is flush at the front of the cab, and then it angles back to 4 inches from the top to the back. And like I said, I think that's going to give me that kind of realistic look where it's kind of angled back from the screen, the glass when it's installed. Now, besides the external dimensions for your monitors for your design, you are also going to need your dimensions for all your other parts. Now, a lot of the parts, such as the front buttons on the cabinet, the plunger, the flipper buttons and MagnaSave buttons, coin door, things like that, they are all going to be pretty much the same dimensions that they would be on a stock part. So if you are buying your parts from a pinball company or from Virtual Pin, they should exactly match and you should be able to just draw them up. But it doesn't hurt to just take some quick measurements and double check that everything is the same stuff before you design it and start cutting it out and find out you have the wrong sizes. Some other things you're going to have to design are your speaker cutouts for your speaker panel. And this is a lot of more custom stuff. It depends on what kind of look you want to have and the shape and size of your speakers. Are they round? Are you using like a Logitech 2.1 setup like I am? So you're going to have to figure out what you're going to have to design for those speaker panels yourself. For me, I have decided that I'm probably, because I have this big kind of rectangular shape to fill in, if I did circles, it might look kind of silly. So I've decided to go with these rectangular cutouts. And I actually found someone in the pinball community that has some 3D printed parts that you can make up that look exactly like the mesh on the new Stern cabinets, which I love the mesh look. It looks really quite cool. So I am leaning very heavily towards that. However, this might even change. I might still do something custom, but right now this is what I'm looking at doing. And when you're doing your speaker panel, I spent a lot of time on designing what that panel was going to look like. In fact, I'll kind of back out here and you can see all the different kind of versions that I went through. So this is the stock panel. And once you get your kind of dimensions, roughly what you're going to be, you could always copy this and then just make another part and make each one unique. And that way you can make changes on them individually and you can keep them to the side and kind of go with what you like. And so you can see, because it's bigger than normal, I had more room than just one circle. And that would look kind of goofy in all that space. So I designed one with 2 cutouts. If you had 2 speakers, that would be probably pretty cool. And then I played with the idea of doing the actual size of a traditional Williams cabinet speaker cutout, where it's kind of like a square hole, but these sides kind of have a large radius and then tighter radiuses in the corners. And that looks really, really nice too. But like I said, there's lots of empty space here that's not being used. And you can see an example of a more traditional 4:1 DMD cutout there as well. And this one was playing with a little bit bigger kind of speaker holes. And then these ones up here, I've talked about this before when I was doing the arcade cabinet. Sometimes it's really important to design things with things being symmetrical. So for example, the space or the border around the speaker holes, if you try playing with like exact dimensions the same, so 1 inch all the way along, it looks a little bit more pleasing to the eye. And this one I did a little bit bigger, so maybe if it was 2 inches or so, kind of border. But you just kind of play around with these speaker designs and kind of figure out one that you like. I liked these ones. However, I didn't like how this one was really thin. There's not a lot of strength to hold anything. So I decided not to do that one. And this one's not bad. I was leaning towards this one until I started looking at the stern cutouts, which I liked a lot. So I went with that one instead. And then you can look online and you can kind of grab pictures of speaker mesh and speaker covers and things like that. And you can just kind of draw a rectangle and import that image. And that way you can kind of mess around and add them onto your speaker panel and see what you like. Now, besides having to adjust the width and the height of the back box to fit these monitors and adjusting the width of this cabinet to fit this 46-inch Playfield monitor, I have stuck to the exact dimensions for a wide-body Williams cabinet. And there's a couple reasons for that. First one is if you start making something too custom and changing angles and dimensions, etc., you run the risk of this thing not looking right. You know, the person looking at it who remembers what a pinball cabinet looked like back in the day, they'll sense that something's not right. It's looking too high, too wide, whatever it is. So that's one reason you want to stick close to the traditional stuff. And then the other one is you're going to want to furnish this with actual authentic parts. So legs and lockdown bars and stainless steel side rails. And because I have designed the sides of these parts exactly how they would be on an actual Williams cabinet, that means I can order the real parts and they will fit and they will look and work properly. So you're going to want to look online for the dimensions. One of the best places I would recommend you go to is mjrnet.org. And there's a bunch of stuff on here, everything from parts and software and boards and programs. But the big thing that I want you to know about is the guide. Some would say this is the Bible of making pinball cabinets, virtual pinball cabinets by Michael Roberts. I can't recommend this more. There's everything that you'd need in here. You just hit on the table of contents. It's a great read through, including all of the dimensions and stuff that you're going to need. So you read through it, and by the time you're done, you're going to know exactly what you need to do. And then, like I said, there's all the dimensions you need as well for all the parts. So, for example, there's everything we need to know to design the sides of the cabinet. One of the last things that we need to talk about before I show you how to draw some of the stuff up in SketchUp is how am I actually joining these panels together. So now if you look at how I've done it, I'm just doing a simple butt joint here where this panel just butts right up against the side panel and they're going to get joined that way. Now, this is a pretty weak joint. However, I am planning on backing this up with a minimum of a glue block on the back, a lot similar to how I did the arcade cabinet. So if you're not sure what I'm talking about, you can always check out that. And I'll put a link up to the top for that. And then I'm also thinking that I might actually throw in a couple pocket holes and screws to hold that before I even do the glue up blocks, so that this will be really quite strong. Now, the reason why I went with this is I had a lot of comments during my arcade cabinet build that they did not like how I used all of these fancy machines and equipment that were in the wood shop. And they kind of had comments like, oh, I guess I can't make this cabinet. So I did this joint on purpose so that I could show people that you can do this with a couple simple tools and very simple processes to get this together. You don't have to do it exactly how they did it and have all of these different router tables and panel saws and things like that. So that's the main reason why I'm going through with it. And I know it's strong because my arcade cabinet is holding together like a beast. So the joint here is like that, and you'll take a look. You can see that they're the same on my back box as well. So just simple butt joints. Probably going to put in some pocket holes with screws to hold them together and then back them up with glue blocks. Now, to go with that, just so you know what I'm talking about, if we quickly look at the guide I just talked about from MGRNet, this is the actual joint that they used to use on the Williams cabinets, and that's called a mitered lock joint. And what's cool about this joint is these sharp edges here at 45 degrees, that's the miter. When they come together, there is almost no seam. It's just right at the very corner, and all the paint and the vinyl artwork will hide that beautifully. And this lock kind of method in here helps kind of align things, and it does give it a little bit more strength. However, the problem with all of these fancy joining methods at the corners is you're still asking end grain, so when you look at the end of a piece of wood and you can see the kind of holes and stuff, that end grain does not really accept glue very well. It tends to suck the glue down. The straw-like kind of forms in the wood, and that takes the glue away from the joint and it makes it weak. So if I was to do this cabinet with the best machines I could, I would be using this just for the added little strength. But to do this, you are going to have a router table, and then you need about $150, $200 lock miter joint router set to do this. But I would do this if I was doing kind of the best that I could. There are some other joints here. So this one is a mitered rabbit joint, and so it's got the same idea. You get the seam right at the very corner, so it's easy to hide. But once again, none of these faces that are touching together will actually be edge grain against edge grain. So it's always edge against end grain, which is not going to be that strong. So there's that one. And then you could even go with just a simple miter, which is a 45-degree cut on both pieces. Same thing, that's even weaker. It's just end grain against end grain. So I'm going to stick with my butt joint. It's end grain against edge grain, which isn't much strength as well. But once I put a glue block back in here, you're going to have edge grain against edge grain about both pieces. And I figure if I put those pocket hole screws in there, it's going to be quite strong. Now, another thing I won't be adding that's usually on these pinball cabinets is this dado groove. I'm doing this in order to make it a little bit more simple for people to try to just do this at home. If they don't have a table saw or they don't have a dado set, you can opt out of this. You don't have to have it. Now, the benefit of having these dado grooves is it kind of has some more edges to kind of square things up and lock things in place. And when you glue and screw this in, you can see that there's actually some edge grain here on the top and bottom. So that's going to glue up a lot stronger, as well as you've got kind of a lip here to hold this in place and add some strength. So if you do have a table saw and a dado set and you know how to do this, then I would recommend doing this. It would help your cabinet. But for my build, I am not going to do this dado groove, and I'm just going to use the glue up block, which is 1 inch wide. So we're going to have a bunch of edge grain to edge grain pieces here that when we glue and screw up, this could be quite strong anyway. So this is what it would look like on an original cabinet. If we take a look at my build, you can see that I have moved this up about 1 inch. And so this area here is going to be filled in with a 1 inch glue block all the way around the bottom. And then that's what this is going to glue and screw into. So we're going to have lots of strength, and there will still be a 1 inch gap in the underside of the cabinet, which will allow for any kind of like underlighting LED addressable strips and things like that. So now I'd like to show you some of the basic skills that you need to know about so you can draw some stuff up in Google SketchUp. Now, I want to stress that this is not going to be an 1.5 hour long video where it is step by step and I'm going to make a complete cabinet with you. It's going to be kind of redundant if I did every single part. It'll be a lot of the same skills you're going to see over and over and over. So I'm going to just show you the skills that I think you need to know, and then I think it's enough to get you going and you can try this on your own. So the very first thing I want to show you is how to actually just draw up a panel. Now, I would recommend you have your dimensions ready to go, so get anything off of MGRNet that you need. So I figured I would show you how to do the side panel here. So the very first thing we need to do is grab the line tool and click on that. And make sure you're on there. And when you go to click, you don't have to be anywhere specific. You can just start, left click. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the front of the cabinet. And so the first thing you need to know is that you should try to draw on the axes. So either the blue or the green or the red, so that you can figure out when you're drawing which is going to be 90 degrees to each other. So it makes it a lot easier. So for example, I'm going to go straight up using the blue. And I know on my drawing here, it's 15 3/4 inches high, so 15.75, and then just press enter, and you'll see that it drew the line and it ended at the length that I specified. And now this is ready to continue that part. Now, because I'm drawing this side panel, I can actually kind of rotate this so I can actually see what I'm doing a little bit better. All right, now because of the way I decided to draw this, the next part would be kind of at an angle. Now, the angle isn't really specified in my dimensions, so I don't want to continue there. So another scales we need to be able to kick out. So press escape, and then I'm going to draw the bottom first. Now, to connect, you can see that if I just hover over the end, it gives me an end point. If you wanted to, you could also do a midpoint, but I want the end. So I'm going to left click. And once again, I want to continue on a line that I'm using that I know is going to be parallel and 90 degrees to other things I draw. So I'm going to go along on the green axis. And I want this one to be 51.5 inches long. So there it is there. And I'm just going to continue drawing. And we're going to go back up on the blue axis. The back of the cab is 23.5 inches. And then there's the little top where your back box kind of comes out over here. So we're back onto the green direction. And this one is 7.125, 7/1/8. And then this angle is the only thing that's left, and we don't have to worry about the angle or the length or anything. And we just have to go to the end and connect it. Now, as in SketchUp, as soon as you connect something, you're going to see it fill in like that. All right, so now that we have this side panel done, it is not thick. It's just kind of a flat kind of surface. So we want to add the thickness of the material that we're using. So depending on what you're designing, you just design it your thickness. Now for me, I'm using 3/4 inch plywood. So I need to be able to extrude this out exactly 3/4 inch. So what we do is we go over to here to the push pull tool. Make sure you're on the push pull. And you're going to pick a surface. It doesn't matter which side, and it also doesn't matter. So left click on it, and then it doesn't matter which way you go at this point either. So we can just extend it out this way. And in the distance, I'm going to put 0.75, and you'll watch that it'll snap to exactly 3/4 thick. All right, so now we've simulated a piece of our plywood that's been cut up exactly to the dimensions for the side of the panel. Very cool. Okay, now that we have this side panel done up, we've got to put some details in. So the next skill I want to show you is how to make a hole for our flippers and our magnet buttons. Now, I don't know if there's an easier way to do this, but this is what I do, and I find it's pretty easy. What we're going to do is we're going to go line, and we know how to use that already. And I've got my dimensions for where these flipper buttons are supposed to be. Now, the first hole is 2 inches from this angled surface down, and 3.5 inches from the front of the cabinet. Now, for me, it's really easy. Just go anywhere on this edge, left click on it, and drag it so that it's on the green line so that you're not off at an angle. And then when you got that green line, let's go in that 3.5 inches. And then if we make the line go straight up on the blue axis and touch, not at an angle, but on the blue. Okay, and now we have the depth from the front of the cabinet, and now we just need to know from this point down 2 inches. So we're going to make, press escape, click on the end point, make sure that you're drawing another line, and we're going to go on the blue, and this time we only want 2 inches down. Now it seems to kind of disappear or make it look like you didn't do anything, but if you kind of keep hovering around here, you're going to find another green point, and it's calling it an end point. So from here to here, there's your 2 inches. And if you wanted to, just so you don't have to find it again, you could kind of just make yourself another little fake line. Let's just put it this way and press escape. And right there is where our flipper hole is for that one. Now, what we can do now is we can also just draw where the next MagnaSave button is going to be as well. So we'll do the same thing. So we're going to go anywhere on the edge here, left click, drag it, make sure you're on the green line. And this one is 5 5/16. So 5.3125. Press enter. Same thing. We're going to go straight up on the blue axis like that. And then press escape. Left click on the end point there, make sure you're drawing a line, and go all the way down so you can see the blue line. And this one is 2 inches down as well. So 2, enter. And then start at the top and go down, and then where you see the green, that's where that MagnaSave hole is going to be. So once again, I'm going to make just a little line to kind of reference where those holes are going to be. So now that we have the position of these holes, we need to get another tool here. And if you go over here and you left click, you'll bring up all the different options of what you can make. So right now we want to make a hole or a circle. So left click on that and we want it right there. And then once you left click on the position of where you want it, you'll notice that you can go out. So that's got kind of like a red and you're specifying that it's on this face, but it doesn't have a radius yet. Now the hole for your flipper buttons is 1 1/8 diameter. So that's 1.125. And so put that in a calculator, divided by 2, and that's going to give you 0.562. So 0.562. And there's that hole. And then while we're still on circle, we can do another one. So we'll go right to the MagnaSave button, click the center point of where we want that circle, and go out and type in 0.562 again. And there is our MagnaSave hole. Now, for me, what I do next is I get rid of all these lines because if I went to go and try to extrude out this hole, you're going to end up with partial circles and stuff because these lines kind of interrupt it. And we don't need these lines on here anymore. So all you do is you have the select tool, select the line that you want and press the delete key. And you just go around and you do that with anything you want to get rid of. Okay, there's that one cleaned up. That one cleaned up. All right, cool. Now all we have is the circles and they're exactly in the position that we want. But once again, they're just circles on this surface. So in order to have the representation of the hole going through the part, we're going to go back to our push-pull. And watch what you're selecting here. We want the hole in here. Okay, so left click on that. And once again, you can drag it out if you wanted to make a pin, but we want to make a hole. Now, this can sometimes be a little sketchy because you can enter the distance here after you go in the direction that you want. But what I find is easier is I want that hole to go right to the other side and be flush with this face. And you'll notice that if I click on this, it actually kind of highlights that it's going to make it. So make sure you see it there, left click, and it looks like it went through. But if you want to check, you can just kind of turn it from the front. And sure enough, there you go. You can see the green line going through the back. Okay, that's one of them. So now we just do the other one. Face. Stick it through, make sure you see it on the face. And there we go. So that's how you can input any holes that you want to make on your panels, whether they're for flipper buttons or for the front cab buttons or for screw holes or anything that you need to make. So another skill added to the list. The next thing I want to show you is how to copy a part. So for example, in our case, we have one side of the cabinet made and the other side is exactly the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the entire part and we're going to go back to move. And if you notice down here, it says control to cycle from copy, stamp, and move. And right now we are moving items. So we're just going to press control. And notice that it says copying now. So all you got to do is select one of these pieces and move it away. And once again, we can kind of keep it on the axis, the red axis, so that the front is exactly level with the left and right here. And then just simply left click and drag. Now you have a couple options here. If you do it the way I just showed you now, you're going to end up with two panels that are unique. They're their own kind of pieces. If you want these things to be exactly symmetrical and you just want to have it the same part, you're going to want to make these things into a component first. Or you can do what I'm doing now and then just make each of them separate a component. Now, I was worried later that when I was moving things around and labeling stuff that they would get mixed up. So I just made them separate. So I'm just going to drop this here and make two different components. All right, so there we got our two pieces here. And we can call this one the left and the right. Now, if you notice that when I grab this, these pieces are not together here. It's not a full component yet. And so that can kind of give you some issues later when you go to move things or grab things. It can just yank it apart. So, and I want to keep track of what these are. So let's make these a component. So left click and hold and drag over your part, and then right click, and we're going to make this a component. And we can give it a name so we can kind of keep track of what it is. So let's call this the right side cabinet. And because I've already have this piece in my actual drawing, I'm going to have to call this something else. So I'll call this 2. And I don't need anything else filled out, so just press OK. And if you notice now, when I click off, wherever I touch on here, it now highlights the entire component. It is now one piece. And as opposed to this, where if I touch the face, it's just grabbing the face. Now, this doesn't mean it's completely locked in. If I want to edit this, I just have to double left click. And as soon as you see the dashed box kind of around the part, you can now go in there and make adjustments and modifications. And then just left click out of the box to come out of it. So I've got a right side component. Let's make a left now. So left click, drag, select, right click, component. And we'll call this the left side cabinet. Once again, I got to call it another name because I already have one of those. Press OK. All right, very cool. So we've got 2 different components, and we save some time by just copying and doing that. Now, if you do this another way, and you notice that when you make a change on this part, and it also changes it to the other part because you copied it, because you made a component first, that could be kind of a pain in the butt. So if you find that happening, what you can do is select the part, right click on it, and you can say make unique, which will be not highlighted right now because it is its own unique component. But if these 2 were exactly the same component and I didn't want that, all you got to do is click make unique and it will separate the 2. So let's draw another panel. Let's draw the front panel this time because there's a couple other things I can show you to get you going on your cabinet. So once again, we're going to go to the line tool and click anywhere you want. And in this case, we are going to go up. And it's the same dimension as the other, so 15.75 up. And then we're going to go over on the red axis. And now for my custom width cabinet, my inner dimensions are 25 inches. That's what I need to be able to clear my 46-inch monitor. So this one's going to be 25. And then we can go back down, and we could go back down and punch in 15.75, or another little trick to speed things up sometimes is if you go over to here and you just hover for a bit, when you drag it over, you'll see that there's a dashed red line there, and all you got to do is go until there's a blue line plus that dashed red line, and that is exactly from the other point. So you can drop that and then simply go back and connect it. And if at any time you're not sure that something kind of went right here, you can always double check it by measuring it. So here's another skill for you. Go over here to the tape measure, left click, go to any corner you want, left click, and from there you can measure. So this is supposed to be 15.75 high, which it is, and it's supposed to be 25 long. And I can press escape and go from the other corner, 25, 15.75. So I've double checked that this part is okay. Now, just like before, we want to add the thickness of the plywood. So left click on the face. We're going to go inwards and we're going to go 0.75. All right, so there's our front panel. Now there's a bunch of stuff that is missing on this front panel, so let's start drawing that. All right, so the next thing we want to draw on here is the actual cutout for the coin door. Now, because it's basically just laying out a hole, it's going to be a very similar process for you laying out the holes for your speakers or the holes for your DMD in your speaker panels. So I'm only going to show you the ones on here, and then you'll be able to figure out the other. So the first thing we need to do is kind of have a layout of where this is. Now the coin door is centered right from left to right, so we have to have a center line. So let's go back to our line tool. And to change your view on something, you just hold down the third mouse button or the wheel, the scroll wheel, and once you hold it down, you'll get that kind of green and red symbol. And wherever you're pointing on the screen will affect how you rotate it. But you can get it to go, and so you can see what other spots you're at. To zoom in and zoom out, it's using the scroll wheel. So depending where you place the mouse, it'll act differently. So if I'm over here and I scroll out, you'll notice it kind of goes towards there. If I zoom in on something, it'll zoom in on where I'm focusing. So you kind of just have to change your mouse around to get the viewpoint of what you want. All right, so back to finding our center line here. There, if you can see, if I go on the edge here, when it gets to the midpoint, it highlights it as a midpoint. So that's exactly the center. I don't have to measure that. So I'm just going to make a center line to get this laid out to start. So I'll go down like that. And then I don't want to continue drawing from there, so I'm just going to press escape. Now on my drawing here, the top edge of that coin door hole is, so I'm going to left click here from the top and go down. And that is kind of an oddball dimension. It's 1.71875. Okay, and that will give us right there. So we're going to click on that. And halfway over for the coin door. The coin door is supposed to be 12 1/4 wide, so we're going to half that. So 6.125 for 1/8. And then we're going to go down, and we're going to go down the full width. The height of the hole is 10.375. And then we're going to go to the left, make sure we're on the red line. And now we're going to go the full over, so 12.25. And then same trick, we can kind of make sure that we hover over this and kind of line it up. And just left click and left click. Now there is our coin door. However, I do not recommend that you make it exactly square to the edges, because the coin doors are actually rounded. And if you do that cut like that, you're going to end up with a hole there sticking out past the coin door. So we're going to radius that off. Now we don't need these lines anymore, so let's get rid of those first. So left click and highlight them blue and delete. Delete. In order to get these corners radiused, this is what I do. You may have an easier way, but this is what I do. So I go use the pen tool, go right to the corner, make sure I'm drawing a line, and go back down onto that edge. And I want a 0.5 inch radius, so 0.5. And you can see there's the endpoint there for that one. Go back up, left click on the corner, go on that line and go 0.5. And so now you can see I've got two green endpoints there that are exactly 0.5. And then what I do is I go over here to 2-point arc, click on that, and it's asking for this endpoint here. And then there's the endpoint there. And then you just got to pick the one that you want that looks good. So for me, I want it tangent at vertex. And there you go, there's my radius. Now I don't want these ends in here, so I'm gonna go back to the select tool, left click that, delete, left click that, delete, and there is your radius corner. And then I'm going to just quickly kind of do these so we can continue with the next part of this. All right, perfect. So there is the cutout for the coin door. We just have to extrude this out, much like we did with our flipper button. So let's do that. So make sure you're selecting here. And same thing, easiest for me is I just flip it around and look at the back side. Select that surface, make sure you can see it kind of hashed out. And there we go. Now we got a perfect coin door cut out here. Awesome, coming along. Okay, next thing we have to do is add the buttons on the front control panel. These are our enter the game, exit the game, extra ball, coins, etc. And I'm only going to show you how to do one of them because it's basically just rinse and repeat for the rest of them. And I already have shown you how to do a hole, but this one's a bit different because there is two holes. It's got a recess in it so that the button can not stick out and accidentally get bumped by your leg and exit you out of a really good game that you're having. So it's going to be much the same, but there is a little bit different. So we're going to make another line again. We're going to go from the top, make sure you're on the top edge and on the blue line, and we're going to go 3 inches down and then just over to the edge. And then I'm going to go from that edge, and in the plans it is 1.6875 inset from there. So that right there is where our hole's supposed to be. So now we're back to our circle, and I would recommend that you start with the bigger hole or the inset part first. So left click, get it dragged out on that green plane. And the radius on this is 0.6875. So there's our hole, and we are going to get rid of the lines now that we don't need them. That way it doesn't interfere with our hole making. Make sure you don't select the wrong thing. If, for example, you're trying to delete this and you accidentally did that and deleted it, don't stress out too much. You've got undo up here. Just click on that and it'll come back, and then you can go back. Control Z is the same thing. Left click on that, press delete. All right, now we're going to go back to our push-pull tool. Select the right thing, go in the direction that we want, and this one here is 3/8 deep, so 0.3875. There we go. And now we have to lay out for the 1-inch hole that goes all the way through. So back to our circle tool, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. And if you hover over the circle for a couple seconds, when you go back to the center, you'll find that it now finds it and recognizes it as a center point. So left click, start dragging it out on the green plane, and it's a 1-inch hole, so we're going to go 0.5 radius. And we can just kind of twist this around viewpoint and see if it's centered, and it looks okay to me. And now we're back to our push-pull. Select the inside this time, and we're going to go all the way through to on face like that. Perfect. You can see the holes all the way through. It's nice and centered, and there is that recess that we talked about so that the buttons are sitting more flush with the surface rather than sticking out and going to get bumped by your leg. So the next thing that you're going to want to do on this front cabinet panel is add the details over here for your plunger and your launch ball. Now, I don't think there's any reason for me to do all of that with you. It's essentially the same skills that I've been just showing you, so it just doesn't make sense to keep repeating the same skills. But let's take a look at my other main cabinet, just take a look at what I'm talking about. So these dimensions and details and where everything goes, you can find those on the plans from mgrnet.org. So I highly recommend you go get those. And you can see, if you look at it, we don't actually have to cut this entire thing out. If you leave it like this, then you can actually grab dimensions off it really quick. But I believe this is a 3/4 inch diameter hole right here. So you would basically lay out that point, that point, that point, that point, and then you're going to drill a 3/4 inch hole there. And then these ones are going to drill 3/8. And once those are all drilled out, you can take a saber saw and basically just cut along those lines there. And if you need a reference, once you drilled the holes, just take a ruler and a pencil, and you'll be able to cut those out. So I'm not going to show you how to do that. They're just circles with dimensions from mgrnet.org. Same thing with the launch button. And like I said, we've already talked about, if you want to change those locations or switch the spots or whatever you need to, go ahead for your cabinet. Back to this demo cabinet here. When we made this front panel, we actually forgot to make it a component. So let's quickly do that so that I can show you the next thing that I want to do with it. And I just need to be able to get a spot where I can select it without selecting anything else. There we go. Right click, make component. We'll call this front cabinet. And because I already have mine called front cabinet, I'll just make it number 2. Click OK. There we go. So now it is its own component and we can have no issues moving it. And so are these. All right, now the next thing I wanted to show you is roughly how you would, once you've drawn a component, how you move it and put it together. That's a good skill to have for this. So because in my design, this is in between the two sides, then what we're going to do is move this. So we'll select this part, select the move tool, and this corner right here is supposed to be flush with that corner there. So I'm going to make sure that I'm selecting the right corner. So right there. And then I can kind of rotate this around and make sure that it sits right against that corner where I want it, and left click to drop that. Okay, there you go. That one's set in there perfect. So now we're going to do the same thing with this guy over here. So back to move. And I'm going to move it right to that edge, right. Feel free to zoom in too, that way you can actually see, and make sure you don't place it at the back by accident. So right at the front, left click to drop. Okay, so you're going to find that's really handy, that once you've drawn all these components, that's how you're going to mock up the cabinet and assemble it so you can see what it looks like. Now, one of the main reasons that I did this just now for you is so also that I can show you something different here. So another skill is the fact that when I zoom in here, this piece here is actually kind of flat. And this one's got whatever degree angle that is, 5 degrees, 10 degrees. And so there is kind of a gap here. Now, I think technically, because you are going to cover this with a lockdown bar, you could just leave that. However, I want to show you another little skill here so that if in the future you want to make something that's exactly at that angle, and there might be something future on that you might need to do that with, you can do that. So I want to edit this piece, and more specifically this face or this edge. So if I have to double left click to get into this part, and then what I actually need to do is move this entire edge straight up so that it is flush with this angled edge here. So I'm going to select that edge, and then I'm going to move it. And because it's attached to everything else will move when I do this. So grab this edge here, and you can see simply by just going up, I can move it. Now you got to be careful because you're going to make sure where it's going. However, now that I've said that, I can actually see what's going on here. It is set here as kind of like a swivel, so it doesn't really give you much options. So all you got to do is bring it right up to the top there, and now it links up onto the edge. So left click to drop it. And if we just get back out of the part, you can see now that that is completely flush. So this edge is now whatever angle this is. Now, like I said, it might not actually need to be done. So when you're cutting this, you can just do that. However, if you are making something that needs to be flush with that and there's an angle, that's one way of doing it. Now, because this edge is higher, when you go to dimension this or figure out how you're going to have that cut, you're going to have to probably measure the tallest edge and cut to that dimension. So that way you got room to put that angle on it. And you'll notice that on this side, because I lined it up with there, it's the same angle here, so it's all lined up. Okay, next skill that's going to come in handy for designing your cabinet is being able to mock up a monitor and then actually get it to change angles. So to be able to rotate something in here so that you can actually see what it looks like at different angles and get what you're looking for. So the first thing here, I'm going to just basically grab this monitor here. And for now, I'm going to move it up and out of the way. So I'm just going to grab the corner of it and just stay up on the blue line here. There it is there, and pop it up and high out of the way so we can kind of zoom in and see what we're doing here. All right, now for right now it looks a little complicated, but this is essentially just a big rectangle that has the dimensions of your decased monitor that you're going to use. And remember, we were looking at it already, so we put a little bit more details of where the vase amount is and how thin the 2 or 3 inches around that monitor edge is for my case. So you've got those skills already. What we need to know how to do is how to get an image on here. So whether you're trying to mock up some vinyl graphics on the side, or in this case, I wanted to just kind of have an image of a Playfield monitor or a back glass or a DMD. And so what I did is I measured the border around my monitor, which is roughly about 1 inch. And so then I just made another rectangle and put it right on top on that face. And then I inserted an image. So if I go into this a little bit, there we go. So if I just deleted the line, but I also deleted the photo here too, right? So all I'm going to do is basically just redo the line so I have a spot for where that image is going to lay. Now, you have to go online and find an image that you want to put in here. So you can put anything you want, but find a popular game that you know and get a Playfield image for it. And then once you've saved it on your computer, you can go up here and we're going to go import. We're going to go import to this device. And we're looking from this device. As you can see, we've got a bunch of images in here. And so this is the one that I used. And you can import it as a material or an image, but it doesn't need to be anything fancy. So we're just going to go image for today. And you can see that where do you want to click and start putting it in. So I'm going to put the image right in the corner here. Okay, once you left click, it now asks you to basically drag it out to the size you want. And then when you're ready, you just do another left click. Now the chances are of your image is not going to be perfectly matching. In this case it is. So I'm just going to left click, but you're just trying to get an idea of what it looks like too. So if it starts touching on the width, but there's still a little bit of a gap on the end, I wouldn't worry too much about that. If you're having trouble placing it, just scroll in. All right, perfect. So now we have a bordered monitor with an image of what it might look like. All right, now the next thing is once you've built your mock monitor is laying it down into the cabinet and getting it at the right angle you need. And so what I did is I played around with some different dimensions and where I want it to be. For me, I'm going to make a 3-inch wide lockdown bar. So this line here is basically right at 3 inches. And then right here from here, I just made a temporary line that is 1 inch. So you're going to make this to whatever dimensions you want, whatever depth you want the monitor to sit at. So the front is 1 inch down for me. And then on the back here, from this line to the top is 4 inches. Now it's not straight across. So when you originally draw your monitor, it's going to be sitting on the green axis. It will be flat and straight like it is on the bottom of the cabinet. So you're going to have to rotate it down to be able to get it down into whatever position you want, or rotate it up, sorry. So let's go back to our monitor here. So now we need to know how to rotate this part. So left click, I'm going to select that part. We're going to go to the move, but you want this one here, which is rotate. So left click on that. Now, when you are placing your first left click, you have to pay attention to where the kind of little protractor is angled at. And that is the plane that you are planning on rotating it. So I don't want to rotate it that way. And I don't want to rotate it on the end. I want to rotate it on the edge, which in this case is turning red. So I'm going to actually grab it from this side just because I put the lines on the other side of the cabinet. Make sure you got the red, and we are going to rotate it from that point. Okay, if you go right to the corner, it might start switching. Might go to something else, so just watch that it's still red and you get in the corner there. So left click, and then it's asking you about a point of rotation that you're going to start rotating it from. Okay, so you notice that this is fixed now. So we're just basically picking a line or a point that we're going to start the rotation kind of from. So we're going to pick up here. And then once you left click, when you start moving the mouse, you'll notice that you are now rotating it from that plane that we picked and using that point that we've picked. So I'm just going to kind of change the angle down to something that would have been more where it was originally. On green axis. Yeah, that'll work. This is how it would have been drawn originally. Okay. And I'll just quickly bring this down to kind of show you what I mean by what just happened. So let's move this from that corner. And when you originally draw this and plop it in here, you're going to see that it is not probably how you want it. This is just straight how you drew it. And so this is now sitting down quite far, 6-7 inches, and it is sitting flat in the cabinet. Now, if that's what you want, great. But for me, I needed to angle it up a little bit more. So I'm just basically going to redo what I just showed you. Rotate. You got to grab that corner and make sure you get the red and that corner. Then I'm going to select the other end here. And then once again, there I've got my rotation. So I'm going to line it up with the end of that point because that's where it is for me on my build for 4 inches down. Left click, and there it is there. So that's how you're going to be able to rotate your playfield so you can get the angle you want, whether it's flush with the top here or whatever inset you decide. So the skills that I just showed you will give you enough to be able to build something like this. There's really no skills extra that are needed to be able to get to this state. It's just more parts, more components, moving them into assembly into a cabinet. You're going to make another couple monitors and insert an image so that you can see what they look like. Some more cutouts, much like we did on the front coin door, some air vent holes, things like that. And all of those dimensions and info is going to be in the mjrnet.org pinball guide. So working with that and the skills I just gave you, you can get something going like this. Now, I thought to give you a little bit of heads up that I would kind of take this one apart piece by piece so that you can kind of see some things that are kind of hidden in here once it's all assembled. So that way you have an idea for when you design yours. And then after I will show you how to lay all these parts out on a sheet of plywood in SketchUp here so that you can figure out a cut plan as well. So rather than me yank this part apart and maybe make an issue or an error for later, I'm going to select the whole entire thing. We're going to go move. I'm going to press Control. And we are going to make ourselves a whole brand new cabinet and just put it off to the side here so that we have lots of space. Now let's take a look at some of the stuff that we're not going to draw. So there's a bottom cabinet. It's basically the same width as this and just reaches to the ends. You've got a back panel here. So we've got two big exhaust holes that we're going to put some computer fans in there, some 120 mil computer fans. And then I've got a cutout here so that I can put a hinge on it and that we can open it up and be able to either have some drawer slides built in here so we can pull out the PC and do any kind of maintenance that we need to on that. Now, looking at the top here, so let's start disassembling this a little bit. So we're going to select the speaker panel. Let's move it out of the way. Okay. Now you can see the rough mock-up of the 19-inch monitor here. So that's just kind of sitting centered in here. And then if you're having trouble centering things, there's a trick to it. And it's kind of hard to see sometimes. So I'm going to move one of these kind of cosmetic panels out of the way. So if I grab this guy right in here and we'll move him out. And here's a little trick. So if you're trying to center something that doesn't exactly just fit perfectly in here, because I believe I put a 1/8 inch space on the sides of the monitor, what you can do is draw yourself a temporary line. So basically right in the midpoint, you start it and draw it to the back, and then you have a little line here, which is the center of your back box. And then when you install the monitor, put a little line there as well. In fact, you still can't see it because there's another part there as well that's part of the lock for the back box. And I just grab it and move it out of the way as well. Okay, right there is another endpoint line that I've drawn on the actual monitor so that I can line up the two. And so basically then you just grab this, and before you move it into the cabinet, make sure that you select the midpoint of the monitor, and then you can line it up with the midpoint or the line that you've just created, and that will perfectly center that. Okay, so let's look at the back here. Now this is just a little rectangle that I added in a grill kind of image that I downloaded to mess with what it would look like. So that's the same as kind of the monitors that I've already shown you. So let's grab it and move it out. All right, now I'm going to grab the back side here. Let's take a look. Okay, so this back piece here, you can see, same tricks. We're just putting some holes in for some venting right at the top. I don't think I'm going to even need a fan up there. I think the heat will naturally kind of rise there, especially with the air moving inside the cabinet. And there's holes between the back box and the top of the cabinet, which you'll see in a sec. So I'm actually planning on not having any kind of access to the back. But what I am going to do is I'm going to put some blocks in the back that I will screw this in when this cabinet back box is done. And that will allow me to basically just unscrew this if I ever need access to get to the VESA mounts or anything like that, change a monitor, but because I won't glue it in. And then because there's no kind of hinge or any kind of big openings, this should add a whole bunch of stability and rigidity to the back box. So that's the plan that I'm doing for that. Okay, let's move this one out of the way now. All right, now in my plans that I've got so far, I have a piece of 3/4 inch plywood that is kind of acting like a big massive VESA mount board, which will attach to the sides and the top and the bottom, probably with blocks of wood and screwed into it, or maybe pocket holes, or even you could use brackets too. So I haven't decided that fully. But looking at this is crazy overkill. At a minimum, I'm going to lighten this up with a bunch of holes, even just for venting for the monitors to be able to breathe a bit, but that should also lighten it. And the other thing you could do is you don't even need to make this board. You literally could make maybe some up and down and some horizontal braces to the VESA mounts. I was even thinking about welding something up out of some angle irons so it was more sturdy. But this will definitely be solid enough. But like I said, once I look at the monitors and when they're installed, I'll figure out where I want the venting so that this is lighter, yet still strong enough to support. Okay, so I'm going to take this guy and move it out so you can see what's around it. Okay, these are the back of the monitors here. So in my case, I will also have to make some kind of a block or an adjuster because they're not flush on the back. I made them more flush on the top, on the front. So I'll just have to put something in to space out whatever the difference is. All right, now, one thing that you may want to change in your design is typically there is a big slot that's in the bottom of the back box and in the top piece of the cabinet, and that is to allow wires to go through and for heating and cooling to go through, as well as if you decide to take this monitor and turn it 90 degrees and put it, then you now have a slot that you can put it down into the cabinet, which can make this space a lot skinnier and give you the more traditional 4:1 DMD ratio, yet you're using a big, cheaper monitor. So because I'm not doing that, I didn't feel like I needed to do that big slot, but I am putting holes for venting and an ability to get all my power cords and my HDMI cables, etc., to go back into the bottom. And in my plan, I only laid out where I want the holes for this part, because I figured that once I put this on top of the cabinet, I can always just center it and transfer those hole locations once it's taken off. So if I grab this one, I can show you what I mean. So you can see underneath, I haven't transferred the holes. I'm just going to lay it out on the top and then just basically transfer those in when I go to make the cabinet. Right, and there's another one of those little lines I was talking to you about to help you kind of center things. So I probably used it for centering this monitor. Oh, actually this one I used for centering the entire back box. So as I was drawing and making these parts, I kind of made the back box separate, and then I basically moved the whole thing and centered it on this cabinet with that line. So that's all that line's for. Now that I've kind of deconstructed this, you can see that there's no real new skills. It's everything I've shown you already. So I didn't want to show you step by step for the entire cabinet, because I think best thing is you need to just get some basic skills and then start messing around with this, and it all kind of just comes together. Okay, you can see some other lines in here that kind of help me transfer where I want to have monitors placed. And then other than that, that's about it to this cabinet. So now that we know how to make this cabinet, the next skill you're going to want to know is how to take all of these individual pieces and lay them out on a mock sheet of plywood so that you can figure out what your cut plan is going to be. So much like I just showed you where we were grabbing the individual parts and moving them off, you're going to do that to your cabinet, and then we just have to mock up a sheet of plywood. So over to the side here. Anywhere you really feel like it. It's kind of a cool thing about SketchUp. We are going to make a mock sheet of plywood. So back to your line tool. Okay, we're going to left click here, go back out on the green axis, and we're going to make this the long side of the plywood. So a normal sheet of plywood is 4 foot by 8 feet. So if I put 8, it's going to assume that's inches. So I'm going to add a little quotation so that it knows it's 8 feet. Press enter and let it continue here. We're going to go on the red axis now. So it's 90 degrees from there. We're going to add 4 feet. And then we can just match it up with this so that we end up with the right side. There we go. Left click, and there is our little sheet of plywood. So now that you've got your rough 4 by 8 foot piece of plywood here, all you're going to do is you're going to take these individual pieces, grab them and move them over here and start laying them out in different kind of patterns and see what works best so that you don't have a lot of waste and you can fit and maximize the pieces in here. Now, you can put them anywhere you want and just try to get it to fit as tight as possible. That is one way of doing this, but you may want to kind of have a little thought about if there's a bunch of pieces that have the same width of cut, you may want to try to lay those all out so that you can have one long cut on a circular saw or a table saw. So that's just one thing to think about. So I'll show you just a couple things here and then I'll show you what I ended up doing. Another suggestion is you don't really want to start just throwing all your little stuff. Grab the biggest pieces you have first. So for example, this side here, we should get that moved out. So once again, I'm only going to show you 1 or 2 pieces here. We don't need to do absolutely everything. Okay, so we're going to move it. Let's just move it away from the cabinet for starters here. Now, problem is we got to lay this down. And like I said, you already got the skills here. So we are going to go to move and we're going to rotate this. And we want it to be that green axis or plane. So we can left click there on that corner. Go up to the other end here, and we can rotate that down so it's on the same plane as the plywood, which is the red axis. So left click. And now we can move this so that it is positioned on the piece. So back to move. And if we wanted this corner to be right there on that corner, then that's where we're going to put it. So you can zoom in to make sure you get the top. Not the top, otherwise it'll sink to the bottom, so we want the bottom. And then go right to that corner and plop it on there. Now, if you are doing this, you have to make sure that you are using the edges of the plywood, because if you have to take kind of a trim to make it square before you start, then you're going to lose that material. So just be aware of that. Now, another trick here to laying out parts and minimizing waste is if this was perfectly rectangular, then you wouldn't have to worry about this kind of wasted space, right? If we just cut this off, this is technically a big piece of waste. However, because we are making the other cabinet side and it has the same angle, we could take the other cabinet side and put it here and rotate it around so that the angle matches, and then that's not wasted anymore. So let's grab the other one, because that's about the hardest thing to figure out on this guy. And so grab that side. Once again, let's move it out from the part. Okay, and we're going to rotate it back down again. So back on the green axis. Other corner. Lay it down on red axis. All right, now we need this to rotate around 180 degrees. And so we're staying on this plane this time. So now we want it to be the blue axis. We'll stick it on the corner there. Doesn't really matter which end you grab the other one from. Left click there. And then now when I move the mouse, you can see that I'm rotating this way. So let's go with the green axis. Now that I got this side of the cabinet flipped over and angled the right way so that these angles will match and there'll be less waste, the next problem is if I just move this over and line up those angles, when I go to make a cut, these parts are going to be short because I'm cutting with the thickness of the blade or the kerf. So I do have to decide what kind of clearance I have between all the parts that I'm laying out here. And I would not make it the exact thickness of your blade. That's kind of asking for trouble. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave 1/2 inch between all the stuff. Now, because this part's got an angle, it's a little bit trickier than the rest. Otherwise, it's easy to leave 1/2 inch spaces. So I'll show you how I do this. So go back to your line tool. On this corner, go from there and go along that line, and we're going to add 0.5. Okay, so that's it there. And then we're going to go up to this corner, and on that red line, on the face, 0.5. Okay, and from there we can just kind of go back and connect the two. Okay, so this line is just a line to represent the spacing between the parts. So now that we have that, we can go back to the select tool. We'll grab this guy, and we're going to move. And this one's a little tricky because you've got some different spots to line up here. So what I would recommend is you grab this corner on the bottom side. And the very first thing I would do is make sure that it is just sitting on the face. So just left click on it like that. And then you're going to do a second move. On this guy right here. And now it'll stay on the face as long as you kind of just leave it on that red line. And then now it's on that edge. Left click. And let's click it off, and then you can see. So there we go. You can see there's that 1/2 inch gap between the parts so that we'll be able to get the room. Yet we're not wasting all this pieces twice on the board. Now, there's no sense in me showing you with every single part here. Basically just start with the biggest stuff. Start laying it out, and if you find it's not big enough, then you're gonna have to move it or go to another piece of plywood. And you just kind of mess around back and forth and see what is going to work, and obviously it uses the least amount of wood. Now, because I'm making a slightly bigger wide body cabinet, I was not able to get it all on one sheet of plywood, so I ended up needing 2. So let me show you what my cut plan looks like. So you can see I've laid out all my parts here, and I really did try to maximize the use of the wood. But I've got everything laid out here, and can quickly kind of start planning all my cuts with something like this. I can literally print this out and take it out with me, and I can decide that, okay, well, I'm going to take a cut here with a circular saw and get these 2 lengths done, and then I can cut this strip here and get this piece off. I can cut that strip off and get that piece off, and then you've got an idea of how you're going to cut this out and the order of cuts so that you don't end up cutting across another part. So this is super, super handy, and you could spend a lot of time just kind of maximizing the space rather than just wasting and having to get yet another 3rd sheet of plywood just to get this to happen. So now that you got your cut plans, the last thing we got to do is have some dimensions that we can actually kind of print off and take into the shop and start laying this out. So let's focus down in on this part here, and let's dimension this piece here so that we know how to make it. So dimension, left click on that. Let's rotate it here just so we can see a little bit easier. We're going to go from there to the other end there, and you can place it in different spots. I would not get into the habit of putting dimensions over a part like that. They usually always come off the part. Make sure you're on the right axis. So we want red, not blue. And once you place it, if you find it's not in the right spot, you just have to left click on it and you can move it and put it where you want. Now, if there's other dimensions that are coming off of other parts here, or even this part, make sure that they all kind of line up the same. That way they look a little neater and more organized. Okay, that's that side. Let's do this one. Okay, 15 3/4. Okay, this guy here. Now, you may want to do these parts individually off the cut list so that you can actually kind of see what you're doing a little better. But really, this is just up to you how you want to lay this out. So in this case, you may want to actually put it over the part because we're overlapping on other parts. It's really up to you. In this case, I'll just put it right over the part. And we got one more up here that we got to dimension. So that corner to that corner. There you go. So now we've got all the external dimensions to be able to lay this out. The only other thing we didn't do, which I could show you for any kind of radiuses or diameters, is to label this guy. Now, if you just do dimension, you'll notice that kind of nothing gets selected to pop up. If that's the case, then you got to double left click into the part. That way you can actually access the circle. So double left click. Now you can access the circle. So we're going to go back to dimension. And for things like circles and radiuses, all you got to do is hover till you see the circle, left click, and when you pull it off, you'll see that it adds the required measurement. So diameter, 1.25 inches. Okay, and that's going to be the same one. Now, as for placement of where that hole needs to be drilled, we can get those dimensions as well. Now, something that's a little bit goofy here is that I can't actually get the center of this circle without getting it measuring and snapping to the top edge here. So a little kind of workaround is just grab a pen tool and grab a temporary line. Now remember, this isn't your actual part, it's just your dimensioning kind of part. So we want the center, so we're going to hover over the radius or the diameter of the circle, which will let us give the center. Left click. And now we've got our snap points, so that red line, and we can snap it right to that edge. Okay, and you can do the same for over here. Okay, now we can dimension that. So right from there to the end point, drag it to the side so we can see what that is. So 2.75. Do the same on this one. And there you go. There's the dimensions for X and Y for where we're going to lay this out and drill those holes. And it'll be exactly the same for this hole, just different dimensions. So once you have these all laid out, you can now kind of zoom out, get a nice straight kind of up and down shot on it. Make sure you can see all the dimensions you need to. And some of these you may have to do another kind of zoom in on it. So for example, that detail you might zoom in and print it off like that. And this one here just kind of centered a bit. And remember, you can move these in the dimension tool. You can just select it and then you can move it in a little bit so that things are not so far out. Okay. And then once you can kind of see all the dimensions and everything you need, and you want to print this off, then what you're going to do is you're going to go up to here. And because it's the free version, we got some kind of workarounds here. But what I usually do is go download, and we just want a picture. So let's download a picture of this. Okay, it gives you a little preview of what that's going to look like. And then you can export it as a PNG. Okay, it's going to give you a warning. That's not a big deal. And there we go. It's in my download already. And so I can use that and print it off and take it out into the shop. So we just have to do this with all the parts. So if we take a look at what I did for my cabinet. You can see with SketchUp it looks like a horrible mess here, but as you zoom in on it, it all kind of scales in and spaces out so you can see what you're doing. So, for example, there's mine here. Got all the dimensions I need. And so what I've done for you guys, if you don't want to do any of this and you just want to make my cabinet the way it's designed, I've zoomed in already and saved a bunch of PNG files so that you can really just print them all off, take them into the shop and start laying it out. And any of these parts that are a little bit more complex and need a little bit more details, like for example, the hole locations for the pinball buttons or for where the plunger is going to be, I've done a zoomed in view so that you can actually see those dimensions as opposed to just seeing a big horrid mess like that. So another thing that you may want to know is how to be able to change the color of your parts so that you can kind of really get closer to what your cabinet's going to look like. So the stock color that SketchUp uses is white with kind of like the black edging. But if you are going to be painting this thing black or yellow or green, it'd be nice to see kind of what it looks like. So if you want to do that, what you do is select the surface, go over to paint. That's going to bring up a whole bunch of stuff here. Now you've got your base colors. You can also import anything you want, whether it's speaker meshes or pictures or anything like that. And once you select it, let's say I want it this color here, you can just go inside on the face and just click on it and it will change the color from the stock white to whatever you picked. So you can pretty quickly kind of go through a cabinet and start seeing what it would look like in the color scheme that you're thinking about. So if you're going to try to make a Simpsons cabinet or Ghostbusters or whatever you're doing, you can kind of quickly change stuff. Or you could start figuring out what a two-tone would look like. Maybe you want black on the sides and any of the kind of trim pieces. Kind of black out some of the stuff that you wouldn't see for your monitor, and you kind of get a really good view of what this thing is going to look like. So I thought that would be very useful for you guys in case you wanted to change that. And to give you an idea, this is kind of what I am going for. I'm going to end up going with kind of like a black look to it. And this would look great. Let all the artwork do the talking and make it look like its own individual cabinet. This really doesn't even almost need vinyl graphics. However, I still think I'm going to be doing vinyl graphics on this build, but the base paint is going to be black. So this will be kind of what it looks like at some version in the near future. All right, that's a wrap on another video from Way of the Wrench, this time on how to design your very own virtual pinball cabinet using the free online SketchUp program. Hopefully with the tips and tricks and the basic skills that I gave you, you should be able to make your very own custom design. If you have any questions or concerns, though, put them down in the comment section and I will help you out as much as possible. Now, if you like the cabinet the way you see it and you just want to print it off and start cutting, I will provide a link down below in the video description so that you can print off the PDFs free of charge. Now that we have this all designed and we've got our dimensions, it's now heading into the shop and start cutting this thing up. So I'm pretty stoked. Make sure you keep your eyes peeled for that video, which is going to be coming up soon. Till next time, take it easy.